Hi, thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Nathan Hinkle, and I'm the lead pastor at White Oak Christian Church. We believe that being a good neighbor and following Jesus, that those are not separate issues from dealing with the racial tensions in our country. We believe that this is fundamentally an issue about people, all of whom we believe are made in the image of our really good Father in heaven. And so we're going to come into this conversation and this dialogue here this evening with a posture of humility, because I have to admit that I own that I don't understand. I don't understand based on the experiences of my life. They don't allow me to understand what it is to be a person of color in this country. And while I don't understand that, I want to understand, and I don't want to remain ignorant, and I don't think any of us do. So my heart is in this, and I'll tell you why my heart is in this conversation, because I believe it is my duty as a follower of Jesus Christ to gain understanding, to gain empathy, and to begin to dialogue on this issue. And it's White Oak Christian Church's desire that we do better in that area, in those areas. And so that's why I'm here this evening. There are no sides to this issue. And so I feel like I need to say that right out of the gate here. There are no sides to this issue. We simply are a people who just want to understand. We just want to come to a better understanding. So we don't want to stay here. I think all of us agree that here is a place that we don't want to stay. We want to get to a place where this anger and hatred and this misunderstanding and this lack of empathy is a thing of our past. And so if we want to go there, we just cannot stay here where we are. So that's why we're here tonight. This is the beginning of a dialogue that we're going to have. And so there's going to be more conversations that we hope to have in the future. So we're just going to be talking about some things this evening. We're not going to be talking about everything on this issue this evening. So we think that's important to say up front. We can't possibly represent everything that should be or could be discussed in our time here this evening. But this is the beginning of a dialogue, the beginning of understanding, and the beginning of this conversation. We will have some pastors that are going to be moderating online as we go through the evening. So if you've got some questions or feel free to post those, and we may or may not be able to get to them here this evening, but we will take note of those, and hopefully at a later point we can respond to your questions. I want to go ahead and introduce the people that I'm with here this evening. This is Quincy Hudson and Missy Craig. And Quincy and I have been friends for a little bit long. We've known each other for a long time. Yeah. Missy and I probably just met like a few months ago. But so Quincy is married to Sarah for almost 2 years. And you have a son who just recently turned 1, and a daughter who is 7, which is hard to believe. I said that. It's hard to believe a 7-year-old. White Oak has been your home church for about 4 years now. You serve in the worship band and play drums. And really appreciate that, by the way, because it's awesome. And you work as a certified inspector for Terminex. So that's a little bit about Quincy. Thank you for being here with me today. Yeah. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Missy Craig, married for almost 18 years to Jason. And you have a daughter who's 13 and a son who will be 10 very soon. And you've been at White Oak for about 3 years. Well, November of 2017, so not quite 3 years yet. And you work as a registered nurse at Good Samaritan Hospital, and you've been doing that for almost 18 years, right? All right. So something that we just kind of wanted to say, as we're beginning here, Quincy and Missy and I have agreed to sit down at the table to have a discussion, all right? We may not say everything right. In fact, we're certain that we won't. And also, I should note that we're all extremely nervous right now. I mean, if you could have seen us beforehand, I mean, it wasn't pretty. So we're all very nervous about this right now. We know we're not going to say everything right. We know that we're going to say some things that probably bother each other, that maybe rub us the wrong way. But we're just coming here to have a discussion in a spirit of grace and a dialogue about a topic that's important to all of us. And so that's why we're here. we're just like right now taking a posture of listening to one another and learning and growing. So we don't speak for every white person, right? We don't speak for every person of color, and we don't speak for every church. We're having this public dialogue in hopes that it will spur more conversation, more understanding on the issue of racism. So this is just a starting point for us, right? So that's why we're here. Similarly, we expect that the online chat would be a safe place for dialogue, for listening and understanding, and not argument or defensiveness or divisiveness or things of that nature. If the people of God, if Christians, followers of Jesus, can get this loving one another thing down, if we can get better and better at doing this and keep working on it, we're certain that things in this country will change. And so that is our hopes. So I want to go ahead and just kind of turn to you, Quincy, as we get started here. Appreciate you being with us. And again, just in the spirit of dialogue and having a conversation, thought you could start out with just sharing with us over the last week and a half. If you could just share with us what's been going on in your heart, in your head, and maybe just share a little bit about that.
So on my heart, obviously, first and foremost, my children. I have young children that are going to grow up, and they're going to ask me, what did you do to help this cause? And they're going to ask me a lot of hard questions. And me as a parent, as a person of color, we have to educate our children on the things that happen that we've experienced. My family and my friends of color, they've been on my heart. A lot of them experience the same injustices every day. I think about how I can help raise awareness. Obviously, my platform, and I thank White Oak for giving me this platform to speak. And then my impact on everything. The families of the lost lives, that's been on my heart. I pray for them, and that their hearts don't harden over everything, and still they're able to we're able to look at them and go through them, and hopefully they can still have love, and love will heal. Mm-hmm. The hate that's inside of people and how rooted they are, that's also been on my heart. How can we change that? And that's partially why I'm here tonight. So, all
right. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. You sharing your perspective and where your heart's been, because there's been a lot of things on your heart.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's hard to wrestle with. Mm-hmm. All of those things that this must be spinning in your mind. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think maybe you could tell us maybe a little bit about your experience growing up, and you have kind of a unique story. You grew up in a predominantly Black, white, and mixed race environments, and so maybe you could share a little bit about your background with us.
Yeah, so my grade school, I've been to 9 different schools in 12 years between 2 states. So I grew up in Price Hill. First of all, I was born in Bloomington, Indiana, and then we moved to Price Hill, and then
Here in Cincinnati.
Okay, yeah. And Darren, my uncle, who's the worship leader here, and you went to college together, and that was also in Price Hill at CCU.
Right.
And that's where we met when I was about 9 or 10.
So we had this conversation right before you started that you were in our dorm room watching movies with us from time to time. Yeah. You were 8 or 9 years old, mm-hmm. So that's a cool memory.
Yeah.
So yeah, very good.
I grew up there. Went to a couple different schools there, and then I moved back into Bloomington with my grandparents. It's actually a small town outside of Bloomington called Salisbury, Indiana. Lived with them for half a school year, and then I moved back to Indianapolis with my mom. And there I went, I lived there for a couple of years, and then my mom entered the Navy, and she did some tours overseas for our country, and I appreciate that. But my uncle, Darren, that we just spoke about, he took me in, and that's how I came back to Cincinnati.
Okay.
So.
Okay. All right.
I've been racially profiled numerous times. I've had good experiences with cops. I've had bad experiences with cops. Obviously, one time that sticks out to me was I was driving to a church camp that I was working at, actually, and that was in Columbus, Indiana. And I was living with Darren at the time. I was driving there to start the week, and I was just driving. There's a cop behind me, and obviously I was nervous, so I started doing the speed limit, and I was obeying the law, making sure I was doing the right thing. And then about a mile down the road, there's another cop car to my left that pulls out from a parking lot, and then another mile goes by, and there's a third cop car beside me. So I'm cornered on the street. So there's one here, and one behind me. They followed me for about 2 miles, and I was shaking. And so I decided, for my own good, to just pull over. So I pulled over into a Walgreens parking lot in Columbus, Indiana, and they blocked me in. So I'm not able to back out or anything like that. And the cop comes up and he starts speaking Spanish to me. and he says, "Hola, señor." And I look at him, I'm like, I speak English.
So high school Spanish didn't come back?
No, not a lick of it.
Okay.
And so, I obviously they didn't think I was black, but they thought I was a person of color. And their reasoning for pulling me over and following me was I was reported a drunk driver. Obviously, they followed me for more than 2 miles. They could clearly see that I was not drunk. And so I just felt like that was unwarranted, and I felt wronged at that time.
Okay.
That's just one of a couple stories
Okay.
that I have, but
Okay.
I have friends that are cops. I go to church here with cops. I've always been respectful to cops. Obeyed their orders. I've only been in cuffs one time, and that was because of a parking ticket. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it scared my wife half to death, so that was fun.
I imagine.
Yeah.
I imagine. Okay.
So that's a little bit about my social injustices that I've experienced, but there's a couple more, but I won't go into all of them.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. That's I have to say, even as you were sharing that, my heart, I don't know, my heart was racing. I'm like, because I even sensed that from you. I don't know, but I appreciate you sharing that. If you're just joining us online, we're here with Quincy Hudson and Missy Craig, and we're just having just a super informal dialogue and conversation about race and privilege and what does that mean and what can we do just to start a conversation or continue a conversation about just what people experience and how we can understand it. So that's what we're doing here right now. I said the word privilege, okay, and I hate that word. And we talked about this earlier before we went live. There was a time when I heard the phrase white privilege that would just immediately be like how dare you? I told you I got real defensive. I didn't understand it. And even now, in this moment, I admitted to you guys, I'm uncomfortable with that word. So I'm not by any means saying well, I've arrived and I'm over it, but it's still a struggle for me personally. But what I've come to realize about this idea of being privileged, and one of the things I thought about before we even got started here is, if the three of us sitting at the table, there's a truth that I am the most privileged because I'm a white male. And even just the fact that that I said that scares the crap out of me. Can we say crap? And I just did. So my apologies. But that scares me, and I don't like to say that. And there are times that I don't even believe it. But I know that that's true. And what I've come to realize that what I think we mean when we say privileged people, or white privilege, is that we're not saying at all that my family or my relatives or didn't have to work hard, that they didn't go through hard things, and that it's not a comment or a name that talks about work ethic, or that whether or not someone deserves something, or if something was just handed to them. Like, that's not what privilege means. It's not a description for work ethic or hardship. All of those things, hardships are there, and difficulties are there for everybody. What I'm learning that privilege means is that I don't have to worry about the color of my skin almost anywhere I go. It's not even a thought, right? It means that the color of my skin has not been a factor in any of the hardships that I or my family have ever faced. The simple truth is I was born white, and so it's not even something that I have tried to gain from, right? It's not something that I've leveraged to kind of it just is. Mm-hmm. It just is. In this country, it automatically just gives me a leg up. And it's subconscious on my part, but I know that I can walk through a store without ever being felt like I'm being watched as a potential shoplifter. I can. I don't think that's never happened to me. I know that I can walk down the street almost anywhere, and my presence won't cause some fear response in people. And so that's kind of what I'm realizing, is that privilege isn't something that was handed, or that I didn't, that it's not that I didn't work hard. It just is a simple fact that I don't notice those things, and I don't have to. And they seem simple, but I've just taken it for granted. And so in many contexts, that the idea of privilege it just simply is. And I'm really humbled by that, and continue to want to understand that. Yeah. So I don't know if you Quincy, again, just talking with Missy and Quincy here about just trying to have a dialogue about where we are with race and privilege, and appreciate you guys being here with us and just talking openly about our experiences, and trying to come to our ultimate goal is we want to understand. We just want to converse and have this uncomfortable conversation. Yeah. And I'm very uncomfortable right now. So that's where we are. So I don't know if you want to talk on that, but certainly I want to open the door, Quincy, for you to talk about specific instances. And you shared one where you felt like you were exposed to racist or subject to racist ideas or acts. And maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, privilege is, something that just is. And me as a person of color, as a black man, I have to calculate every step or every time I step out of my house, I have to calculate every move that I make, whether I go into a store, whether I am just driving, whether I'm walking down the street. We have to calculate every single move that we make.
Can I ask you, I know this is off script, when you say calculate, I don't know, just because I don't understand.
Yeah.
I kind of do, but I really don't. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
It's cautiousness. You're always on the defensive. You're always looking over your shoulder. You never know who's watching you. You never know, what someone might say to you just because you are being you. It's hard because it doesn't happen every day to me, but I never know when it's going to happen. And that's why, I have to calculate those moves. I have to, every time I step outside. My job, I go into people's homes. So every time I go into someone's home, I'm thinking, especially right now, you know, I've had a conversation with a couple customers about, you know, Black Lives Matter. And, you know, luckily they've been, you know, pretty responsive and open-hearted and whatnot. But I have to go into these people's homes and, you know, I'm calculating every move. I'm making sure, you know, I'm respectful. I'm making sure that they feel comfortable. It's not about my comfortability, it's about their comfortability, because I don't want to make them uncomfortable to the point where, you know, they lash out and then I'm in a situation that I wasn't prepared to handle.
Right,
no. So
I appreciate you sharing. I don't know if that helps you, because that was helpful just for understanding. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other specific instances where you can think of, or just you're in your experience, and like we said, you're not speaking for all people, you're not speaking for all people of color, you're just speaking for Quincy Hudson. Any others that you would want to share with us? Or
there is one more that just keeps sticking out in my mind. It's I was actually it was a Sunday morning. I lived probably, you know, 5 minutes from Bridgetown Church of Christ, which is a church that I attended when Darren was there, and I played drums there too as well. So I was on my way, and I got pulled over by a Chevy cop, and I was super nervous, and I was already late. And you know how Darren is, so
I do.
Yeah, so I was already late. I got pulled over, and the cop comes up to my car and kind of like peers into my window, and he's like, "Oh, you're not who I thought you were," and just left it at that. And to this day, I'm utterly confused on who he thought I was and why he was stopping me. But that one just it still baffles me to this day. So that's one that just kind of stuck out. But yeah, I mean, I've been followed through stores, stuff like that. But like I said in my Facebook post, I don't know if anyone has seen it, but in that post, I started out by saying I'm a biracial man. But in saying that, I'm a black man in the eyes of anyone else. When they see a person of color, that's, you know, when we say all Black Lives Matter, you know, if you are a person of color, you're black, and that's how it is in America. And so whenever, you know, I say I'm a biracial man, I'm a black man, and my kids. That's why it's important for me to, you know, do this today. To, you know, silence isn't an option right now. Is because my kids, they are part black. They are black. Even though they're 3/4 white, they are black. And so that's kind of the stance on the Black Lives Matter. You know, it's all about what people define as black, and I think it's people define black as people of color. And that might be, you know, someone from the Middle East, that might be someone from India, that might be, you know, someone from South America, someone from Mexico, Native American, people of color. They're black. And so, I mean, that was my stance, that I based that whole post about. I don't know if that helps or not.
No, I mean, it does. Those are things I've never really heard anybody say before.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's kind of what's hard for us to judge, like what's helpful in a dialogue, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, what is helpful in a conversation, and what's not. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're so nervous, I'm feeling good now, but because it's like truly a dialogue is really just that. Mm-hmm. We're just hearing from your experience. I'm sharing mine. Missy in the moment's going to share hers, and that's it. It's not helpful or it's not unhelpful necessarily. Yeah. It just is. And I think just the nature of having a conversation with people, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So yes, yeah. So before we get to Missy, because I know Missy, you've got some questions and thoughts too. Quincy, I just had to ask you, as a white guy, and really the leader of what is a predominantly white church, not predominantly white, not completely, but mostly. What is it that and then our church, it's our church, can do to be better neighbors and share the love of Jesus in the midst of this crisis?
Yeah. Well, I asked a lot of my friends that same question, and a lot of the responses were the same. And the big one was listen. Just listen. It's very simple. You just listen to what we have to go through every day. You listen to how we feel. You listen to it's been hundreds of years, and we're back to square one. It feels like, and it's hard, but just pay attention. Listen. There's a lot of information going around. My friend Tennessee, he's actually from Africa. He's very successful here in America. He says, pay attention and listen. Lots of information going around, along with misinformation. Understand the why first, then serve as a support for the solution as both a church and an individual. So, what he means there is, there's a lot of misinformation going around. There's a lot of, obviously, media twists things in a way that benefits them, makes it more interesting, makes it, they might bend the truth, and sometimes they just flat out lie. And
you're saying that the media can lie?
Is that yeah, I know. Hard to believe. Okay. Hard to believe.
All right, no, I'm just making sure I heard you right.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Everybody knows this, but everybody uses them as a source. And that's where you can't get the source from. You have to go to the people that are who you have to listen to, the people who are out there, marching, out there rioting, out there, there's a lot of people that are angry. There's a quote here from MLK. I can't find it right now, but
you will.
I will later. But it's listening is the bottom line, and then you have to have an open mind. Go ahead.
No. I was actually just breathing, but that seems so crazy simple to me for you to say listening and an open mind. Like I feel like that's a no-brainer, and yet for myself, I can say that I really haven't been listening. I'd like to say I have an open mind, but like you said, hundreds of years, and we believe that the start of healing or even eradicating racism, if that were possible, it starts with listening. That's just humbling.
Yeah.
And it's not even that overwhelming, but it clearly is hard.
Yeah. And the quote that I was going to go with was, writing is the language of the unheard. And when they've been screaming, and they being the Black community, we've been screaming, listen to us, listen to us, listen to us. We've done silent protests, we've done marches. Those things are not working. And at that point, we feel unheard. That's why you see the rioting going on.
Yeah.
Quincy, I actually had a question for you too. First of all, thank you for sharing your perspective. It was enlightening, and I do appreciate you being open and honest. That's what this whole conversation is about. But how are we going to begin to erase the stereotypes placed upon the community of people of color and make people realize that you're just a valued member of society and not always this likely suspect?
Yeah.
How do we erase those stereotypes? Where do we begin to work on that healing?
So that's a really good question. It's a stereotype. It's always going to be. So I mean, it's really up to the individual to really break that down. It's got to go one by one. I mean, there's no mass way to do it, because there's always going to be people that know that prejudice and feel that prejudice, and there's just not going to be there's not going to be a single way to just diminish that stereotype. So just, I mean, kind of open your heart and just be, considerate. I mean, if you walk into a store, how would you feel if you were being followed, watched every step? If you were running in your neighborhood, and how would you feel when you see people driving slow behind you? How would you feel, when you get pulled over by a cop and the first thing they say is, "Get out of the car"? I mean, it's based on the individual, and I feel like each individual will have to break down that stereotype. But I don't think it'll ever be diminished.
No, I appreciate that.
Me too.
That is a old tool that we don't use. Like, just like, what's it like? It's like, well, picture yourself walking in their shoes, right? We've heard that, but we don't. and it's such a powerful tool. Once again, just wanted to say, thanks to Quincy and Missy being here with us, and we're just dialoguing about race and privilege, and just trying to hear from each other and understand and listen, and just empathize the best that we can at this beginning of a dialogue that we hope is one of several to come. But Missy, again, thank you. Just kind of wanted to hear your heart, kind of what's been going on in your heart and mind over the last week and a half, and just share that with us.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks again, Nathan, for inviting me tonight. This has been awesome. I think the first emotion that definitely came to mind was just sadness. Sadness and anger that in 2020 in the United States of America, we are still dealing with this topic of racism, and we are still dealing with this kind of hurt upon our nation. We are not a third world country. We should be better than this. The fact that we have this racial profiling still going on, I just feel like we should be beyond that by now. We're better than that. So that was just really hard for me to deal with this week. The obvious fact that a human being was killed by another human being, and that human being showed no emotion throughout the entire event. No remorse, no empathy, nothing. I chose not to watch the video of Mr. Floyd being killed, and I got a lot of slack from friends and family for that. But my whole reason for not watching that video is because I had respect for him. I had a respect for his family, and I didn't want his last moments of dignity to be viewed by me. That I just that's why I chose not to watch that video. The media, unfortunately, did a great job of portraying what he went through, and I heard it enough times. I didn't feel like I needed to watch the video, because if that were my loved one, I wouldn't want the nation to be viewing their death that way. I just didn't feel like that was necessary. I'm disappointed in the human race. It's hard, again, it's just hard for me to fathom that we're dealing with this.
Yeah.
I just can't wrap my mind around it. I have fear for the people of color in their community. Who's going to be next? How long is this going to continue to go on? When is enough enough? It's just really hard to think about it. And then, like Quincy said, my kids, our generation's failing, but I still have hope that the next generation can do better and be better than we are. And that's where my heart's really been. How can I, as a parent, instill in my children the values that they need to make this world a better place and to bring about the love of God and find a solution to racism? I feel like we can do it, but it's going to take all of us together to do that. I made the decision I was discussing with my husband back and forth, what do we tell our children? What do we let them see? What do we not allow them to see? I don't want to scare them, but I think they need to be told and informed of what we're dealing with as a nation. They're not going to be able to escape it. I mean, racism penetrates every inch of our society right now, and it's not going away. So I just felt like I had to be open and honest with them. So we allowed our kids to watch. We obviously didn't let them see what happened to Mr. Floyd. We told them what happened to Mr. Floyd. But we did allow them to see some of the rioting and things going on. And we explained to them why the rioting was happening. And my son, I was tucking him into bed that night, and he said, "Mommy, whatever happened to everybody just loving everybody? Aren't we supposed to treat everybody kindly and fairly, regardless of the color of their skin?"
Wow.
I mean, for a 9-year-old to get it, why can't we as adults? Why is it so hard for us to comprehend that everyone should be treated fairly, no matter what they look like, no matter what their race, religion, poverty level? Why is that so hard for us to grasp? So that was just something that really got me thinking, what as a parent am I supposed to do to change this outcome for my kids?
Right.
So
I have that same, is like, how do you talk to your kids about this, and we have, and they've seen media, I wonder, Quincy, I mean, you have kids that, you have a 7-year-old, so she's not too young, right, to be having dialogue about this.
She's smart.
Yeah. So how would you say we could talk about this with our kids?
Well, here's the thing. Kids are connected through the internet. If they don't hear it from you, they're going to hear it from another source. And if they hear it from another source, they might be misinformed. It's our responsibility as parents to relay the correct information and instill the principles that we know are right, in the eyes of God, to them. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to talk to my daughter about it yet, just because we get her on a week, off a week. And so I do plan on talking to her about it. I'm not sure if her mother has actually talked to her about it yet, but it is something that I'm going, my son is 1, he's not gonna understand, but her, she's wise beyond her years anyway. And I think that she'll be able to handle it. And I do, I know you don't want to see the video for the reason of, you want to save his last moments of dignity. But I do encourage you to watch it. Because then at that point, you can see how enraged, it made the nation. And I know hearing of it and hearing the details about it, it's different than watching it. I do encourage you to watch that, and I challenge you to watch that. So.
Okay. I like Quincy. I did a lot of thinking in my head as to how, as a parent, again, I could better educate my children. And I did come up with 4 basic steps in my mind that could possibly be what parents are looking for and what we need to help our kids address these issues. Like Quincy said, I think the first thing is we have to have the conversation. We have to sit down and be able to answer the hard questions.
Right.
And like Quincy said, if we're not willing to sit down and have the conversation, somebody else will with them. And it's not going to be the way we want to portray it. I know it won't
That's
be.
right.
Just like sex, drugs, relationships, when parents aren't willing to give out the education, they're going to go to their peers, they're going to go to social media, and it's not going to be pretty.
That's right.
It's just not. I think a lot of parents don't want to talk about race because it's a touchy subject, and you don't want to misinform your kids, but we can't allow our kids to think that everyone's the same. We have to acknowledge color of skin until that's the only way we can move on. Before we move on, we have to acknowledge there are differences, there are cultural differences, ethnic differences, and that's our part of healing as a nation, is to acknowledge those differences and learn about those differences. And I think too, these conversations that we're going to have with our children, they are going to help shape our children's character in the future and how they forego and treat other people in the future. I think that's the only way we can move forward.
And hopefully they're not fighting that same fight that we're fighting today.
Correct, absolutely. I think not shying away from that conversation of racism is the first way that a parent can raise an anti-racist child.
That's so beautifully said.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's just so beautifully said. I'll have to listen to the recording later and write that down, because you're absolutely right. I mean, if parents won't have the conversation, then it'll take another generation to start having this dialogue, and this will persist.
Absolutely.
That's so good.
Absolutely. I think another thing too is we need to educate our children about Black history. And I'm not talking just about civil rights movement. Black history goes far beyond the civil rights movement. It goes far into what we're dealing with right now. I'm talking about making sure that children understand what people of color have suffered throughout history, not just in 2020.
Yeah.
Way before the Civil War, way before any of this that we're dealing with right now, and really, really understand what racism is. And if we teach our children that racism is simply a thing of the past, they'll begin to think that the way people are being treated right now is okay or justified, and it's not. Mm. You know what I mean? We have to make sure that our kids know that racism wasn't just something that existed in 1960. We are in 2020, and it's worse now than ever before, possibly. So I think that's really important. Taking our kids down to natural history museums, down to the Underground Railroad Freedom Center here, really engaging in the history of our people of color, and just, getting books out of the library, letting our kids learn about the history that our people of color went through, sitting down as a family and watching movies about white privilege versus social injustices that were, just put on our people of color. And then at the end of watching that movie, answer the hard questions again. See how they felt watching those people being treated like that. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of us growing as a nation, and as a parent, I think that's my duty. Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely.
So
I think she should write a book.
No.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, definitely not.
I would buy that book.
Definitely not.
The book about reading books.
Yeah, a book about reading books, absolutely.
Yeah.
I also feel like, as the parent, we have got to set the example. Our kids are like magnets. They watch our every move. They are going to respond how we respond. If we say, again, racism doesn't exist, it's not our problem, why are we concerned about it? We have to watch how we respond, because our kids are going to follow in our footsteps. And if they see us trying to make a change, which is my hope tonight, my kids will look back on this video and see, I want to make a difference. That's why I'm here. Maybe someday they too will choose to be the change. And that's my hope for them.
That's good.
Yeah, we have to also acknowledge our own unconscious biases. There's so many unconscious biases that we have, but we have to be willing to break down this old way of thinking and move forward with a new way of thinking. We have to.
That's the individualized breaking down of the stereotypes that we were talking about before.
Yeah. It's not going to happen overnight, but we have to at least try to make a difference. And I think, again, it starts with educating ourselves. I'm going to be very honest with you, Quincy, and I'm going to become vulnerable here. I did not fully understand what the Black Lives Matter movement meant. I really didn't. I knew it was out there, but I chose to get on the website and I chose to educate myself because I wanted to know what it was about, and I wanted to be able to fully understand what it meant when people were saying Black Lives Matter. That's that. I felt like I needed to do that, and I'm glad I did, because it helped me understand.
And that's the kind of open-mindedness and motivation that we need from a lot of the country. the ambition to go out and educate yourself. I have a picture here with a sign. A guy is holding a sign. It says, "We said Black Lives Matter. We never said only Black Lives Matter. We know, obviously, all lives matter. We just need your help with Black Lives Matter, for Black lives are in danger." And I put that in my notes just because it's said very well and very clear to the point where everyone can understand.
Absolutely.
And that is what it is. It's nothing else. That's not whatever you think Black Lives Matter means. If it's not that, it's not that.
Couldn't agree more.
That's really helpful.
It really
Because
is.
there's just a lot of, you talk about an inflammatory phrase, that can be one.
Oh, yeah.
And like privilege, and
Absolutely.
everybody just gets just nervous real quick. And that's just a really disarming, but yet humbling and alerting way to think about it. I know we got to wrap up here. The time went quickly. I told you it would. We'd be
It did.
fine.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But any last thoughts that you wanted to share before we kind of sign off here? Or
Yeah, I can go first. I think, again, our final thing that we need to do is we need to be the change. It starts with the three of us here. It starts with the Facebook community watching us live. We each can make a difference, and we need to realize that. We need to remember that words cannot be unheard, actions cannot be undone, sights cannot be unseen. But people can always choose to have their hearts transformed. And I think that's why we're here today, and that's what starts tonight.
Very well said. I just like to leave off with a couple quotes from MLK. An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We need that consistency. It starts with, right here in our own town, getting, the right people in place to enforce these laws, and then it snowballs from there. And then another quote that I really liked was, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." And I challenge, I know a lot of people are angry and they want to match hate with hate, and that's not the way. It's through love, through the love of God. And then one last thing, a thought that I had as I was driving the other day. I know a lot of the younger generation, they like to keep up with trends. Don't be a sheep for trends, be a sheep for Jesus. I wear this bracelet every day. What would Jesus do? I'm not perfect, but it helps me in a lot of situations to realize my actions and really think about what would Jesus do. So don't be a sheep for trends, be a sheep for Jesus.
I think another thing too is we need to stop being the peacekeeper and learn how to be the peacemaker. It starts with us.
seems like Jesus said that somewhere.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think he did. I think he did. Guys, I appreciate that. I love that we just get to end with Jesus, because ultimately, I think I could speak for all of us. He's the reason why we're at this table today. He's the reason why we're at it, because we love him and he loves us, and he's got this beautiful plan for us, for our families, for our city and our nation. I think it should be the church that champions the way. And that starts with a dialogue now. So thank you. And again, I this is the beginning of a dialogue. We didn't say everything there is to say, and we didn't say everything perfectly, but we're starting a dialogue that we hope will continue into the future here at White Oak with community leaders or the police, and other people who just, that we can understand each other and we can move forward in love. And so that's our goal. So in a little bit, we'll definitely post on our Facebook page some resources that you can dive into, even resources as parents to kids. And we would love to have you join us on Sunday, on 9 and 11 a.m. here online. We are jumping into a conversation on Sunday morning called Redo. We feel like we are in the middle of an opportunity just to call a timeout and that we redo. And it's Corona and racism. And we feel like this is an opportunity for us to stop and say it's time, particularly this Sunday, for a redo in our relationships and how we approach and rebuild understanding and responsibility and empathy into our relationships. And so we're going to start that conversation, which really is kind of a continuation of this one on Sunday morning. So definitely hope that you can join us then. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. We love you guys and have a good night.